You're listening to the Healing from CPTSD podcast. My name is Justin Vanderwind, and I am your host. In today's episode, I'm going to be talking about the 5 keys to healing from CPTSD. If you haven't done so already, be sure to visit our website at healingfromcptsd.com and sign up on our email list for regular updates, as well as a free weekly newsletter. While you're at it, check out our new YouTube channel and subscribe for regular video content. If you're interested in taking your life back from CPTSD and narcissistic abuse, the Healing from CPTSD course is now available on our YouTube channel completely free of charge. This course is some of the best tools and strategies for understanding and overcoming CPTSD in your life. Feel free to check it out. And if you feel inclined to share your story at all or talk about your experiences dealing with CPTSD or narcissistic abuse with me on the podcast, I would love to have you on the show sometime. Just shoot me an email at justin@healingfromcptsd.com and we can set something up. All links will be in the description below. All right, everybody, and it's not a trick. The podcast is officially back on. I just want to take a moment to apologize for the lengthy gap in time there from the last episode. That was not my intention. Just so you know, I had some projects I was working on, and I wanted to get them squared away before I got back into the podcast more mainstream and made it more of a long-term sort of commitment and stuff like that. So I'm ready to do that. I'm ready to go more of a full-time capacity here. I was contemplating just switching over to just doing YouTube videos that were shorter and more concise, but I get a lot of positive feedback from the podcast, so I decided to just keep it going. I do like the ability to talk a little bit more, for a little bit more time and a little bit more in depth, a little bit more, I guess, one-on-one than maybe you get in a, a YouTube video. But we will have the YouTube video as well. So I'm going to be doing a blog, podcast, and YouTube channel, all for healing from CPTSD. And that gap in time, it will not ever happen again. Now, that doesn't mean I might not take some time off or something like that, but you will definitely be given ample notice. If I take like a week or 2 weeks, or maybe I need to take a month or something off, you'll know. I'll let you know, and I'll let you know when I'm coming back at the same time. Because to be honest with you, I know how important healing from CPTSD is and how hard it is to do so. So if we can get any kind of help we can get, and I include this podcast in that in the YouTube channel, I feel it's important and has some value. So I'm glad to be back here with you guys. You can expect weekly podcasts moving forward, as well as a weekly blog post and a weekly YouTube video. Well, I'll put the podcast on YouTube as well. If you haven't joined our group on Facebook, Healing from CPTSD Support Group, I'll be sharing things there as well. And our newsletter will be, it's kind of like one place. I'll send out a weekly newsletter where you can get the latest podcast, YouTube video, blog post, and some other interesting things as needed. So today, jumping back in, I really wanted to turn things around and start to really focus in on actually healing from CPTSD. I created that course, and I decided to put it on YouTube, but I realized, so the course is there. You can go through it whenever you want, however you want, if you want. But I decided that it would be a good idea to make the podcast like if you just want to get some tips and insights on how to heal from CPTSD, just listen to the podcast. I want to do that too. So at this point, we're going to get a little bit more into, the specifics of healing from CPTSD. Oh, and another thing I mentioned in the intro here, I'm opening the podcast up for anyone who would like to, come on the show, share their experiences and their stories, and maybe just have conversations about dealing with CPTSD or narcissistic abuse or anything like that. If you're open to it, my door's always open. So, as I mentioned, you can just shoot me an email at justin@healingfromcptsd.com, and we can set up a date and time. It's really sort of an open forum. So if you'd like a safe place to be able to share and to be heard, not only by me, but others, you're free to do that on this podcast. And if you're, any therapist or, mental health professional that specifically specializes in CPTSD and narcissistic abuse, it'd be nice to have them on as well if you happen to be listening. And I'll have some of those on as well. I'll go, reach out to them over time as well. So, okay, so today the topic is the 5 keys to healing from CPTSD. And I boiled these keys down to make healing from CPTSD as simple as possible to even just to remember, like a Swiss Army knife. Pete Walker says in his book, CPTSD From Surviving to Thriving, that I seem to remember he said something like his book was kind of like a Swiss Army knife for healing from CPTSD. I don't know if it was the whole book or maybe he just had a particular strategy in there that was like a Swiss Army knife, and so it was helpful. But I decided to make it refine what he did, and make a little bit more of a compact and precise Swiss Army knife based on kind of what he was talking about, but also based on my own experiences from healing from CPTSD myself. And I was able to boil them down to 5 key areas that I not only believe if you go through each area, you can get your life back for sure from CPTSD, but I've done it myself. This is what I use. So we'll just kind of go through each key here, and I'll talk a little bit about what it is, what it entails, and talk a little bit about my experiences in this area too. So key number 1 is self-love. Now, we talk about this all the time. I know you hear it all the time, but for those of us, many people really struggle with self-love. But it really, and I know it sounds kind of like maybe corny or cliche or something, or like something from the Hallmark Channel, but it's true. It really is true. And actually practicing it. You know what I'm saying? Like on every level, and it's strange at first. It's kind of alien because a lot of us dealing with different degrees of emotional trauma or, low self-esteem and self-worth, or, a lot of us just don't love ourselves, that's a huge issue. Regardless if you have other, emotional or mental issues going on, lack of self-love is huge. Ross Rosenberg talks about how his term for codependency is self-love deficit disorder. And that applied to me, because a lot of us will put ourselves in situations that aren't, we're trying to be giving and quote unquote loving to others and stuff, but we put ourselves in situations that aren't good for us, right? Like, we allow ourselves to be around people that aren't good for us or that don't treat us with respect, and the truth is we may not be completely conscious of it, but those kind of behaviors, we're so obsessed with like partners or relationships many times because we don't have self-love. So if we're not in a relationship or something, or some situation where we perceive we're getting love from, we feel like just alone and we don't like it. Well, the truth is those feelings, it's because it's like a lack of love, right? It's like if you're thirsty, you've got a lack of water going on. Well, the truth is we believe you have to go out to some outside source to get the water, but it's not true. You can get your own water. You can get a bottle of water from the gas station and quench your thirst in 2 seconds. And in a similar way, you can start practicing self-love right here and right now, and you can do it, and you'll feel much better on an emotional level, all over, on every level of your being. And one of the most amazing things about self-love is that you begin to realize. At first, it's a little weird, and it takes some time to get used to doing it because we just have never. It's like a muscle we just haven't used before. But once you get the hang of it, you're like, okay, like I feel so much better. Having more not only positive thoughts but loving thoughts about myself. And forget about other people. Like give yourself, instead of like forgiving others and loving others. I'm not saying don't do those things, but if you give yourself the permission to focus on doing that for yourself first, you'll get your needs met, and then it'll be a lot easier to do that for other people at the same time. And that's what's happened to me. Like the more I know what I need on an emotional level, and I'm giving myself love, the more I know how to do it for others. So it helps a lot. Especially when it comes to like relational healing, But, self-love is really every level, right? So, you get to start with your thoughts, and that's where our vicious inner critic comes into play, is, you're learning to soothe yourself if you're feeling a lot of anxiety or stress, or, really getting a hold of, your mind's tendency to have irrational, sort of obsessively worrying thoughts, and sort of learning how to transform them into more rational, loving thoughts. Like basically, if you're like I've used this analogy before, but it's kind of like if you're like a scared child and you've got all these like fears in your mind or something, and you're just working yourself up into an anxiety frenzy. And, you have like a comforting adult come, maybe your mom or your dad or somebody else who just, they're able to soothe you and tell you that everything's going to be okay. And you do feel better, So you can do that for yourself. So loving yourself, having self-loving thoughts, making yourself feel safe. Because a lot of us, I don't really have anxiety anymore. It's really weird. Like, I'm not saying I don't get like nervous in certain situations, but the anxiety I used to have is pretty much it's just gone. I don't know what to. It's really weird. Because I started like meditation and stuff like that. The truth is, like, once you learn how to get your emotional needs met, B, you're practicing self-love, and C, how to make yourself feel sort of safe, like emotionally. The anxiety, in my experience, is really it's like a lot of us are in situations where we don't feel safe on an emotional level. I mean, you may not like be unsafe as far as like, someone's going to attack you or something physically or something like that. But, I realized there were a lot of situations in my life where I didn't feel emotionally safe, right? Like to either, express myself freely or just kind of be my genuine self without getting some kind of ridicule or put downs or shaming. You know what I mean? So if you can do that for yourself, make yourself feel kind of safe, anxiety will kind of like start to vanish. And you'll be like, okay, like because the truth is, we say emotional needs. In my experience, and my belief, honestly, is the need is love. Like, it's like, it's really, the mind likes to make things complicated, but it really is as simple as that. If you can practice self-love and self-care, that is what your emotional self, your mental, your whole being needs. So, self-love is a huge one. And I didn't love myself for a long time, but the craziest part about it was I didn't know any different, right? Like there's a lot, and that's a sad reality for a lot of people, is they just kind of grow up, or it never occurs to them, right? Like they're never like, oh, am I loving myself? They're just, they're not even thinking about it. And no one's coming up to them and saying, hey, are you loving yourself? You know what I mean? Most people are, when they think about love, they just think about some relationship with a man or a woman or something, or marriage. But, self-love's important. In fact, this isn't a religious podcast, but I'm thinking of that phrase from the Bible, the quote, love your neighbor as yourself. And it's kind of like, yeah, love your neighbor, but you're only going to be able to love your neighbor as much as you love yourself. That's kind of how I interpreted that. So if you don't love yourself, you're not going to have much love to give anyone else. But if you do love yourself, it's going to be much easier to love others. So, other areas of self-love include like, taking care of yourself, like making sure you're getting the right nutrition, like food-wise. And food's the easiest for me, like to start practicing self-love, because and believe me, I've had this problem too, where it's like, a lot of us self-soothe with food, right? Junk food and crap, pizza, like all kinds of stuff, sweets. I'm right there with you if you struggle with that. But it's kind of it kind of makes, and what's going on there when we're eating, it kind of makes you feel kind of safe and secure, right? And so it's like an emotional thing. But when if you're able to get your needs met by, practicing self-love on an emotional level, it actually becomes easier to like eat better. It's weird. I know that sounds weird, and then your body, your whole nervous system, everything about your being and your body, all of it, when you start eating better, you're like, oh wow, I feel better, like nutritionally, but I also feel like I don't know, like I just feel happier or brighter or something. And that's part of practicing self-love. If you're sitting around eating Snickers and Cocoa Puffs, I'm not saying you can't enjoy yourself once in a while, but, that's a huge area for a lot of us, and we don't love ourselves. And so I would actually say, like, this isn't a diet podcast, but, if you want to lose some weight or go on a diet, I would actually forget about that first and start practicing self-love and getting your emotional needs met. And then once you got that down, then start introducing like weight loss and better food and stuff like that, because it'll be a little easier, and it'll be a little easier to love yourself. Surrounding yourself with the right kind of people, really allowing yourself to do and be around whatever brings you genuine joy, right? And that could be like a hobby, just anything you genuinely enjoy. Like even if you have a family and you've got kids and all these responsibilities, like self-love it's important to take a little time for yourself to sort of water your inner garden. And, do a little something that you enjoy. It's good, it's healthy, and I would say important to take time to do things that really bring you joy and fulfillment in some way, whether that's creating something, or maybe you're musical or a writer or a painter or anything else. I've actually gotten into, I don't know what it is, but I always had like an interest in like animals and little creatures and like reptiles and amphibians and stuff like that. And I was more into that when I was a kid, but I wasn't, I don't know. So I got out of it for a while, but recently, some of you may be aware of this. I've come across this whole like magical world of like the husbandry of a lot of these creatures where they're like creating, they call them vivariums, which is kind of like a bioactive terrarium basically, but it's specifically designed for both live plants and certain animals and stuff like that. And like there's soil in there, so the plants are growing, but there's also like little, certain insects that kind of break things down in the soil. And so you create like a little bioactive environment, like self-contained environment, to the point where you really don't have to, like, once you get it set up and it's functioning properly, you don't really have to clean it because it kind of like takes care of itself, which is really interesting. So I was just fascinated by it. And then I found out this world where there's so many people that are doing these things. And I don't know, to me, it's like a fun little hobby because you got like, they're neat little creatures. You have a pet, but then you can also kind of like do a little mini like gardening thing going on with the plants. You can build these things. And it's just something that's really interesting to me and brings me a lot of joy. So, I've got my plans to create my first vivarium here, and it's pretty fun. I'm excited. It's like a fun little hobby, and you can kind of build it gradually. And so, I'm allowing myself to do that. I try to take time daily to do things that I genuinely enjoy, because a lot of times we neglect ourselves, right? And so it's important not to do that. So, self-love, anything that brings you joy, your food, nutrition, your loving thoughts, being around the right kind of people, and just kind of being like, they say reparenting yourself. Just you can have like a mental and emotional inner mother and father sort of all the time in you, right? Like, are you doing okay? How you doing? Like, check in with yourself periodically. And if there's anything you need, like if there's anything you really feel you need, right, on an emotional level, allow yourself to sort of, like be okay with that and then go do it, right? Like if you need some time off, maybe you need a day off of work or something, like just, allow yourself the time to do that. Those are all examples of self-love. And as I started practicing those things with myself and, emotional healing and all that stuff, which we'll get into in a second, I just felt better overall. And I knew, and by practicing it, you're also like rewiring your brain to where it knows now like where to go to get what it needs, like as far as love and to feel safety and a sense of wholeness and joy and stuff like that. So that's where the anxiety starts to disappear, because when you can create your own inner like love and peace and all that stuff and get your emotional needs met, the anxiety really, I'm not saying this across the board, but for me, anxiety was always like, I felt unsafe. I felt like exposed. You know what I'm saying? And anywhere, like in really socially, like at school or anywhere. And so it was really difficult for me, no matter what it was. Any area where there's like people, it gave me like I just felt exposed and kind of like, I was concerned that I wasn't going to be okay. I mean, that's what was going on in sort of a subconscious emotional level. But once I learned how to make myself feel okay, no matter where I was, it became the anxiety started to disappear. So self-love, that's the first key. The second key is processing your trauma. And this is really important. And for some reason, I don't, everyone says stuff like this, like you got to process that trauma. But in my experience, I'm not saying no one knows how to do this or nobody's doing it, but I'm telling you, as I've said many times, none of the therapists I saw, they never mentioned this or gave me any tools. A lot of this I had to find on my own through my own experiences and going to different a lot of these workshops that I've mentioned, they do process trauma, but it's a little too extreme for those of us with CPTSD. But it's not that complicated, which is interesting. The processing of trauma is really just sort of doing what they call verbal ventilation, which is just really allowing yourself to speak and express yourself from your genuine, raw, emotional pain or whatever's caused you pain, right? And so obviously you can do that with a therapist. You could do that with a friend, or you feel is safe. You could do it in like a 12-step group or something. But, as I've mentioned many times before, and this is in the course I put together, my favorite really is writing. And Pete Walker actually talks about this, specifically writing about emotional issues of the way that you feel. Because like on a scientific level, there's been studies that show that, when you're writing about traumatic events or trauma or emotional pain, it really allows it allows you to put words to feelings. A lot of us have trouble with that in general. I did for the longest time. And it allows like, sort of unintelligible or incomprehensible emotional stuff or pain or whatever's going on in there to come over to the logic side of the brain where you can look at it consciously. And then the writing, if you're allowing yourself to sort of, what they call it, angering or grieving, where you're just kind of like, it really is just allowing yourself to rip with whatever you really feel or however you'd really like to speak or something you'd really like to say to someone. Instead of, just think about all the stuff you've suppressed or hidden or tucked away because you're just trying to be a polite person, but you've got all this suppressed stuff in there. There's got to be a healthy and safe way for that stuff to come out and be processed. My favorite, honestly, is writing. It's the most powerful, and you can do it on your own, and you don't even have to, no one has to hear it. You know what I'm saying? You don't have to unload all this stuff onto another human being who then has to go process that trauma. They got their own trauma, then they got all these. I feel some of those therapists, it's like, man, they come out of work at the end of the day. It's like, man, I just went through 20 people of, they get home and it's like, I'm wiped. So there's safer and healthier, in my opinion, ways of doing this. Writing your pain, your emotional stuff down on paper, allowing yourself to grieve or verbally ventilate is extremely powerful for specifically processing your trauma. And another thing is, you can do that with your feelings on a particular person or issue, but you can also, when you write out memories, it allows sort of like suppressed or, more unconscious, compartmentalized pain or trauma to come to the surface to be sort of healed. And, to kind of like, because a lot of times when you're experiencing complex trauma, the brain sort of compartmentalizes it and sort of suppresses it so that the rest of the brain can function normally in a extreme situation or an abusive situation, or if like you're in a car accident or something, your brain, it's like it's a traumatic situation and experience for your brain, but at the same time, your brain knows like, okay, we got to survive here. So, and take care of the situation. So we got to like put this trauma in the back of our brain here so the rest of the brain can function. But that stuff needs to be dealt with. And in my experience, writing is the best way to do that. Again, you can do it with a partner or a friend or someone you trust. Just to kind of, they call it venting. But I always felt kind of bad venting on people. You know what I'm saying? I mean, I'm not saying I haven't done it, but I don't know. With the paper, it's like you don't have to worry about that, and no one even has to know ever, right? You could just, when you're done, you just like ball up that piece of paper and throw it away. So that's my favorite. The processing trauma is crucial to the healing process, and you'll also feel much better at the same time. And when you're writing, like feelings, right? It allows your brain to. You're also kind of rewiring your brain to where it knows. It knows like what you're feeling and how to express it, and then it's easier to do that like just in day-to-day life where you don't have to necessarily be writing stuff down. Your brain will just know, okay, like this is how I'm feeling, this, and it'll help you, just to be able to cope and function, in general. So processing trauma is key number 2. Key number 3 is sort of connected to key number 1, which is learning to self-soothe in stressful situations. And for those of us with CPTSD, stressful situations really are, like emotional flashbacks, right? That's the key for us, where you feel like that overwhelming sense of just doom and dread and like it's like anxiety to like extreme, and you don't even, a lot of us, that's where suicidal ideation comes into play, where it's like you don't even. Like it's so overwhelming and so painful and uncomfortable. Your brain's like, I don't even know what else to do. And so you start, having suicidal fantasies just to sort of have some way of coping with making this feeling go away, right? So again, this comes back to, self-love, self-soothing. It's specifically in those key moments, like in life, right? Where you don't have a pad and a pen necessarily, and you're having a sort of an emotional flashback or a panic attack or something like in real time. The key is to start with your breath. 100%. Like, just make your breath your best friend, frankly. I mean, everyone should do it, but it really helps. And everyone knows it to some degree. They tell people to breathe when they're freaking out and stuff like that. Well, it's true. Like, so you can take control of a lot of like your physiological states with your breath, right? Just practice deep, calm breathing first and foremost when you're feeling stressed out. And that'll help in and of itself. But it's really a combination of your breathing and your thoughts, right? So you start breathing, you just kind of catch yourself feeling overwhelmed. Breathe, slow, long, deep breaths will, help your nervous system to relax a little bit and calm down. And then you're in a little bit better of state of mind to, start thinking a little more rationally and lovingly toward yourself, where, you just basically tell yourself, like, it's okay. Like, you might feel like there's like a monster coming, or you're about to, get into some kind of, war situation, like your emotional and mental perceptions of what's going on, for those of us that experience emotional flashbacks, are like really exaggerated from a lot of what's actually going on. So this really helps. I mean, dealing with emotional flashbacks is a key way of overcoming CPTSD. And so, Pete Walker has said this, and it's been my experience too, that unfortunately, emotional flashbacks never completely 100% go away, according to him. My experience is that's true. The goal is to be able to recognize them and to manage them so that you can move through them and like kind of, bounce back from that flashback and get back to whatever you were doing in your life. Honestly, if you want to make self-soothing and moving through emotional flashbacks as easy as possible, number one is the breath. Just, catch your breath. It'll bring you into the present. And, then start telling yourself inwardly, having self-loving, self-soothing thoughts. Like, it's okay. Everything's going to be okay. Whatever the problem is. And because I had that mind where I'd like worry and obsess about everything all the time, because I just had this panicky state of mind that things weren't going to be okay, right? Like, that was sort of the subconscious thought process there, was whatever's going on, it's not going to be okay. So telling myself it's going to be okay, and no matter what problem arises in life, because problems arise, there's always solutions to every problem, right? So this is kind of an example of having like self-soothing / rational thought processes with yourself. And honestly, the more you do it for yourself, you can do it with others, right? Like, it'll be easier to kind of like soothe other people if they're having some trouble one day. So breath to self-soothe, breathing, telling yourself it's okay. Maybe you can just say, I'm having an emotional flashback, but I'm okay, or something like that. And just kind of keep, have some kind of safe, phrase for yourself, kind of ready to go in your back pocket in case something happens like that. And then again, like, once you become aware of these things and you're able to self-soothe that way, it'll become, your brain will be like, it'll radically shift towards being able to self-soothe and sort of self-regulate on its own. It's really interesting, because it's like we just have faulty wiring, right? The last video I did on YouTube was all about how, the good news about CPTSD is it's as tough as it is. It's all environmental based, right? Like, it's all emotional, psychological wiring and perceptions and misperceptions, and the way we were either raised or whatever else happened to cause us a lot of stress and anxiety and trauma. And as hard as it is, though, we can completely heal and recondition ourselves and get our lives back, which is the good news, right? Because there was a time I thought, I was like, damn, I'm gonna have to live like this for the rest of my life. That's why I was so obsessed to heal, man. Like, I couldn't take it anymore. It was like I was drowning or something, So that's key number 3, is learning to self-soothe in stressful situations or when you're having an emotional flashback. Key number 4 is actually something that you might not hear every day, but something that I heard once and I started putting into practice, and it really helps a lot. I mentioned this before, but key number 4 is actually learning things you never learned because of fear. Now, I don't know about you, but growing up and dealing with CPTSD, my emotional mechanism was to freeze and to isolate. So because I was sort of like frozen and isolated to such an extreme extent growing up, there was a lot of things that normal people and kids and people growing up experience that I just didn't. You know what I'm saying? It's almost like, Austin Powers when he goes into like some cryogenic, whatever that was, where they freeze him and then he goes back in time or something like that, or goes into the future. It's like literally you're frozen and no new experiences are happening, even on an emotional level, right? Like, so emotional maturity, like growing up in a healthy, emotional, mature way doesn't happen either. So you got to like learn all these new things. And then the older you become, it's like the harder it is, the more anxiety you feel. So learning new things, things, like my dad wasn't in the house and stuff. So there's just a lot of stuff I just should have known, but just didn't. And one day I realized, I was like, man, because I would have these like self doubting thoughts or self-destructive thoughts like, man, I'm so dumb and, so, like there's so much stuff I don't know. I'm like a mess or whatever. And I feel bad about myself. But then one day I had this thought, I was like, wait a minute, like, it's almost like being an adult who never learned how to swim. It's like, yeah, maybe it's a little embarrassing or something for a few minutes, but, you can just go learn how to do it now. And it'll be embarrassing for like a few minutes, but then once you learn how to do it, then you can swim now, and no one else is ever going to know any different, right? You don't have to go around telling people I didn't learn how to swim till I was 35. So I was like, oh my God, yeah, of course. Like, well, so I just started learning, like I just made a list of the stuff that, just small stuff that I didn't know, that I should have known, or I wanted to know. And I've made that a regular thing. And you know what? It built self-esteem, it built self-confidence, but it also sort of was an interesting way to sort of move through what Pete Walker calls therapeutic flashbacks, where you kind of expose. And so, because a lot of us don't grow really or expand because of the emotional flashbacks, because if we're exposed in any way, right, it can very likely trigger an emotional flashback. So this could be like exposed, like in front of a group of people and they're all looking at you now, or, in any way, it can cause an emotional flashback. And so to prevent emotional flashbacks, a lot of us just don't do anything or isolate, or, I'm sure many of you have had experiences like this. So learning new things, like it got me out of my that unhealthy, like I'm still an introvert. I still enjoy my me time, but it got me out, like I was learning things. So it's very empowering. It's very, it's great. Like, I'm like, yeah, now I'd like make a list and do like a little checklist. And once I learned something new and I checked my thing. And the other thing is, it's so empowering, like on a personal level, because a lot of us feel so helpless, right? Like learned helplessness. And this is a huge thing with self-abandonment is, we abandon ourselves. We feel on an emotional level like a helpless, powerless child in many cases, right? So learning new things and empowering yourself gets rid of that helpless feeling, because number one, you learn, oh man, I've learned all these neat skills now that I can use. I mean, for me, cooking was one. I think I mentioned that before. Doing some basic stuff with cars, or even like football, as crazy as that sounds. Like I never got into football. I got into it more recently, and I'm following. I mean, it's not my favorite. It's not like my first go-to for entertainment, but it's fun to kind of keep up with and to be able to talk about in social situations. And part of me was wondering, like, maybe I didn't like a lot of sports because of how much yelling that was going on. You know what I'm saying? Because not only there's people yelling in the stands on TV, or if you're actually at a game, there's people yelling. But then, if you're in a, like when I was a kid, my dad, like his friends and all that stuff, like there's a game on, like someone scores or something and everybody starts yelling. Like for me, I think my brain just interpreted that as just sort of a unpleasant experience with all the yelling going on. So I didn't want even concerts, like it's just so much noise and yelling, like it just was kind of like triggering for me, I guess. So I kind of isolated myself from that. But again, you don't have to become James Bond here or anything. You just little things here and there, and the more you learn, the more confidence you get, and then because you have these new skills, you can learn in any situation. It helps socially because now you're not like some guy or lady who doesn't know how to do anything. Right? But the other thing you learn, and you're like, why is this such a revelation to me, is that the truth is nobody knows everything, and you can always learn, right? If there's something you don't know, it's okay. Like, it's okay to say, hey, you know what? Because a lot of us don't want to like be vulnerable, or you know what I'm saying? Like, we don't want to reveal that we don't know, because our brain interprets it as we're sort of, we're there's something wrong with us, or we're flawed. But that's a good example of an irrational thought, right? Like it's like, oh my, we're so hard on ourselves if we're not perfect on something, or if we don't know something, or we're inexperienced in a certain area. But the truth is, like nobody's a master, right? This is a good example of a rational thought process. Nobody knows everything. Everyone has room to grow. Everyone has room to learn. There's certain things that certain people know that maybe you don't know, but maybe there's stuff that they don't know. And you know what? It's all okay. You can learn. And this is a great way to connect with others too. It's like, hey, you know what? I'm not really familiar with what you're talking about, but maybe you could talk to me about it. Maybe I could learn a little bit about it. And honestly, today with the internet, I mean, my God, you can just pull out your phone and look anything up and at least get a little understanding of whatever it is that you're looking to learn. So I love learning things I never learned because of fear. It's empowering. It gets rid of the feelings of helplessness and sort of, not being independent or something like that. And, it's helpful with exposing yourself gradually to small but gradual therapeutic flashbacks, which are healthy for you. And the fifth and final key is honestly learning and practicing healthy assertive communication skills in a safe place. Assertiveness and effective communication. So, because what we've talked about with trying to hide our place inside of us that feels really vulnerable and where we might have an emotional flashback, a lot of us are shut down to the point where, because when we talk about exposing yourself and being vulnerable, or being vulnerable in front of others, or trying to be exposed where we might feel an emotional flashback, there is no better way or more direct area than speaking, right? So we're speaking, because a lot of it, like I got to the point where I was very shy, very shut down, but also kind of like, I wouldn't speak up for, like, you know what I'm saying? Like a lot of assertive situations I had trouble speaking, because the problem was, for me anyway, was that if I did speak up, I'd be vulnerable and sort of exposed, and I was concerned that I would have an emotional flashback. But the truth is, a lot of times I would, and I wouldn't be able to, like, I'd feel like frozen or kind of like stunned in shock or something. So I would just kind of like hide myself, like my personality, right? Like I'd try to blend in with other people, or just try to like what they like, or you know what I'm saying? And or just try to say whatever I thought needed to be said to please people, or to get their approval, or you know what I'm saying? So I would shove myself and my own genuine thoughts and feelings on giving things away. And honestly, being assertive, I wasn't allowed to be assertive growing up, really, but because a lot of people, they interpret assertive children as like bad children, or like children that are talking back. You know what I'm saying? And it's weird because, yeah, there's kids that can talk back, but they're also they're also little humans. They have their own thoughts and feelings, and they should be able to speak and be themselves from their core self, right? So if a lot of that's shut down, and you're made to feel like you don't matter and all this stuff, and your voice doesn't count, then that's a problem too. So anyway, long story short, I found that I needed, and by the way, my communication skills were horrible. Like speaking from an emotional place, or like speaking to, like if I was dating somebody, like, oh my God, the anxiety, the panic. That's why I had to leave those relationships, because I was panicked. It was just an overwhelming sense of panic and anxiety, and I didn't know how to make it stop, because in relationships, you're exposed, right, to a certain degree, and you're vulnerable. Well, I didn't know how to be that way, so I would just kind of feel really uncomfortable and panic and get out of there. I feel so bad for those girls, my God, because I wasn't trying to hurt them, but I couldn't. It's like I didn't know what was going on with me, and I couldn't handle the like intimate situations. So what did I need? I needed healing. I needed reconditioning, right? So that I could be vulnerable and open and assertive, and also know how to recognize and soothe myself through emotional flashbacks, should they happen, whether I'm in a relationship or not. So honestly, assertiveness and effective communication is great for like every walk of life, right? Personal relationships, family relationships, work relationships, intimate relationships, and dealing with conflict. Communication is a problem for a lot of people, I've noticed, whether they have CPTSD or emotional issues or not. And so, there's certain times where you might need to give someone some critical feedback, or, some, kind of reprimand someone, whether it's at work or in life. And a lot of us have trouble with confrontation, just in general, but especially those of us with CPTSD, because, again, the confrontation, any kind of confrontation, what does it do? It kind of exposes you, and you might experience an overwhelming emotional flashback when it's going on. So we don't, we like avoid everything. I mean, I don't know, maybe that wasn't how it was for you, but for me, I avoided a lot of anything that would expose me to a potential emotion. But it's just what I had to do to make myself feel better and not experience an emotional flashback, because I didn't know what it was. I didn't know how to get out of it. But now I do. So like if you need to set healthy boundaries with people, effective communication, assertiveness, because my poor communication skills were such that, like, the way the way I grew up was like, I would like be quiet. I'd be like, if like someone was doing something that I wanted to stop or have changed, like I would say something, but it was kind of a passive way of speaking, and then if it got to a certain point, I would just kind of like explode and start like either yelling or like, just be, I went from like passive to like aggressive, not like physically aggressive, but you know what I'm saying? Like I would snap or like, cause I didn't know how else to communicate. Cause you know what the truth is? That's how my family communicated. All of them yelling and screaming, like no, you know what I mean? So it's like, I did need to change. I needed to take responsibility for that and change it. But at the same time, it was like I didn't know what else to do, right? Like, because that's just, to me, that was just normal. That's how everyone in my family operated. No one knows how to just sit down and communicate what their needs are on an emotional level. So then when you're in troubling situations, you can stand up for yourself by being assertive, but it's also healthy assertiveness, right? Like you can be healthy and assertive and, sort of direct in a healthy way that still respects the other person. You know what I'm saying? Like I was raised like you just gotta yell and scream. If someone does something wrong, you just yell and scream and put them down. And you know what I mean? There's no need for that. In fact, I honestly believe there's really no need for yelling and screaming at people. I mean, I don't know. It's just not. That's why I like the phrase effective communication, because you can yell at people, even if you're like a boss somewhere, you can do that, but is it effective? Are people going to really hear you? Are people really going to want to be around you or work with you? So this is very helpful because it's extremely powerful for self-empowerment, and it helps, it helps you move through emotional flashbacks, even on your own. Like I've done most of this stuff just in front of a mirror, to be honest with you. And in the beginning, I was nervous just doing that, as crazy as it sounds. And I know a lot of people feel that way too. Like they're just afraid to open up. Well, to get through CPTSD, we got to open up and experience sort of therapeutic flashbacks, but we can do it gradually. So, and then see, the thing is like once you know how to self-love and get your needs met, regulate emotional flashbacks and anxiety, and then you learn and practice healthy, assertive, and effective communication, all that like adds up. And then like, because the other key to healing from CPTSD is relational therapy, right? Well, what are relationships? Communication, right? I mean, that's so when you have healthy and effective assertiveness and communication skills, it becomes much easier like to be with people. Even just if you don't, you don't want to be in a relationship, that's okay. But like just dealing with people in day-to-day life, it's so much easier. And that anxiety goes away because you know what you're doing. You know how to get your needs met. You know how to self-soothe if anything goes wrong. And you know how to communicate from your feelings, and you know how to communicate to other people's feelings. And then before you know, it's almost like riding a bike, right? Before you know it, you're like off and running. And you're like, wow, my dad's not pushing me. Like I don't need training wheels anymore. I don't know. You're just riding that butt like you got it, And then, you just take that and the rest of your life, and it becomes much easier because it's more pleasurable and enjoyable to, love yourself and others, like in every respect. So these are the 5 keys. If you want to write these down, or like, save this episode of the podcast somewhere to reference, the 5 keys: self-love, processing your trauma, learning to self-soothe in stressful situations, learning things you never learned because of fear, and learning and practicing healthy, assertive communication skills. And you don't have to do that all at once. You don't have to do it. Just choose one. Just take it easy, take it slow. Even if just your breath, right? Just practicing day to day, just becoming a little more conscious of your breath, and especially in situations that are stressful for you. And maybe you can practice a little like working on your thoughts and your vicious inner critic. If something's going on, like you're really worried about something, just ask yourself: is this like a rational concern, or am I just worrying myself unnecessarily here and driving myself crazy? If somebody, with people, if somebody's not, being respectful to you or is breaching your boundaries, or, look, it's okay for, not everyone's a good fit for each other, right? No matter what kind of relationship, it's okay to be like, you know what, this just isn't working for me. I'm going to go be around people I like that actually like me, So, just take baby steps, right? And we'll go more into depth in these, in future episodes, but this is just sort of an overall summary of what I refer to as the 5 keys to healing from CPT. And I promise you, if you go through all these things and you actually practice them, you'll get over CPTSD. I promise you. A lot of us think we can't, by the way, and that's just more irrational thinking. It's challenging, it's hard, but it can definitely be done. 100%. I've done it. Other people have done it. And you can heal yourself sufficiently and recondition yourself sufficiently so you can live a happy, normal life, right? It doesn't mean something might not happen to flare up once in a while, but now, see, the beauty is you'll have the skills to deal with whatever comes your way. You'll know how to soothe yourself and get your needs met, and be more sort of on your own side, right, rather than abandoning yourself, right? So there you have it. I think that's probably good for this episode. Again, I'm really happy to be back with you guys. I will be uploading regular podcasts weekly now, so don't worry about that. If you guys have kids or you like Halloween, have a happy Halloween and a safe Halloween on Monday. And again, if you want to check out our YouTube channel, I'll leave a link down below. Maybe you could subscribe, and there'll be more videos coming out there. But I decided to create something where whether you like, some people just like to read, some people like to listen, some people like to watch and listen. So I'm doing all of it. Why not? So, the blog will be on our website, healingfromcptsd.com. The YouTube channel, the link will be down below. And if you're listening to this, you already know where the podcast is. So I hope you guys are doing well. I love you guys. And I will see you in the next episode. Take care.